Today we're going to talk about Reconstruction after the Civil War. Got a couple of good videos in the top right hand corner for you. One of them is I've Got a Secret. It's a game show from the 50s. That one's kind of interesting. And the second one, the Lincoln Conspiracy, goes through the true conspiracy to overthrow our government, or the U.S.'s government. So Lincoln stated his philosophy in his second inaugural address. Basically, he says, "With malice toward none, with charity for all, let us strive on to finish the work we are in to bind the nation's wounds." Basically asking for a lenient peace, a lenient peace after the war. Before this can happen, Lincoln is assassinated at Ford's Theater in April 14th, 1865 by John Wilkes Booth. This was part of a conspiracy to weaken the North, and so the South could take Washington. Actually, this was a detriment to the South. They lost their best friend. The South lost their best friend when they lost Lincoln. Keep in mind, this was a true conspiracy to overthrow the government. This was not a made-up one. This was actually John Wilkes Booth was part of four other assassins that failed in their attempts to kill their heads of state. So here are the conspirators: John Wilkes Booth, David E. Harold, Edmund Spangler, Lewis Powell, and Mary Surratt. They met at Mary Surratt's house to plan this assassination. Here's how they're punished. Mary Surratt will become the first female ever executed in the U.S. This took place in Washington, prison in Washington. So economic shifts. If you look, before the Civil War, the South was the economic leader. Agriculture was king. King cotton, if you see here, about 60 cents a pound. And they were dependent on imports. As far as the North is concerned, they produced 10% of the goods used. Industry was growing, but it wasn't there yet. Of course, the North wanted tariffs. They pushed for tariffs to protect American industries. However, look at after the Civil War. The South was devastated economically. Agriculture is not king anymore. Just to kind of give you an example here, in 1869, cotton was 16 cents a pound. Cotton in 1870 drops to 8 cents a pound. So these very rich plantation owners could no longer get the money for their products. So they were forced to pay for labor. So they're going to not make as much money. Basically, what happens here is you get world competition. You have a world market after the Civil War, and Britain had a colony in India, or they had India as a colony, and India grew cotton, and Britain could get it cheaper. The North became the economic leader. They will go on to produce double the products the South will. So, of course, the North will continue to push for protective tariffs to protect American industries. So this is a political cartoon. If you look at this, here's an African American here, and he has the ticket to vote, and here is an ex-Confederate, and he can't really do much. So the second bill, or the second attempt at Reconstruction, actually Lincoln's comes out in 1863. But the Wade-Davis bill is a response to this in 1864, and as you see, it's proposed by radical and moderate Republicans. Remember, this is Lincoln's party. It's an alternative to his 10% plan. It's Congress's first attempt at Reconstruction. Most Confederate soldiers had to take the oath to the U.S. State constitutions had to abolish slavery within them. The state had to assume its debts and acquired during the war, so they had to pay off their debts. The military and political leaders banished from voting and holding office, public office, and Lincoln actually just lets this bill quietly die with a pocket veto on July 2nd, 1864. And the reason is he looked at this and he said this was too harsh of a peace plan to move forward. So, you know, he rejected this proposal. If you look at his plan that he passed the year before, 1863, or he proposed the year before, his 10% plan, it was a generous policy toward the South. Amnesty to those who pledge loyalty except for high-ranking military officials. Once 10% of the state had taken the oath, the state could be readmitted and restored into the Union, and they have to accept all the Union laws dealing with slavery. Radical representatives plan with Thaddeus Stevens and Charles Sumner. They wanted strict enforcement, and they wanted revenge on the South. Congress could make the rules for readmittance, not the president. They wanted the military to rule in the South until the states create new constitutions and gave African Americans suffrage, which is voting rights. So, look at this picture and what do you see? First time in U.S. history we have African American or black congressmen serving representatives. Hiram Revels, he was born in Fayetteville, North Carolina in 1827. He becomes the first African American senator, and he's from the state of Mississippi as an adult, but he was actually born in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So President Johnson's plan after Lincoln dies. Basically, he calls it presidential Reconstruction, to abolish slavery in the South, to repeal secession, in other words, like it didn't happen, and to repudiate war debts, which this means to accept the South's war debts into the federal debt. So, of course, this is a very controversial issue for 5 years after the Civil War, and it's more political than financial, actually. So, if you look here, Congress would not accept states they started passing laws more in line with the radical Republicans. Of course, Johnson will veto this. Remember, Johnson's from Tennessee. He's a Southerner, and he was an old school Democrat, and Lincoln put him on the ticket basically to show unity. So he saw these things as very harmful to the South and very much not in line with a generous peace plan, which is what Lincoln envisioned, more conflict resolution. What he saw these radical Republicans doing was passing more conflict termination plans, basically telling the loser, enforcing the will of the winner upon the loser, which is a very unstable peace. And so he vetoes a lot of these things. If you look here, the amendments, the 13th Amendment, it was actually passed while Lincoln was alive in a lame duck Congress, so that was a political feat of Lincoln's. 13th Amendment ends slavery. 14th Amendment and the 15th Amendment, these are known as the Civil War amendments. If you look here, the 13th Amendment abolishes slavery. 14th Amendment, and I'd put a star by that one. That one's big even to this day. It defines citizenship. It gives citizenship to former slaves or people of former servitude, and it outlines that basically equality for all citizens, equal treatment of the law for all citizens. This is a big one to this very day. So the 15th Amendment, it allows African American suffrage for men, for males, not women yet. So Civil Rights Act of 1866, Congress passed it. It was to prevent racial discrimination and prevented states from passing black codes or laws of discrimination. Johnson's going to veto this bill, but he's also going to veto the Freedmen's Bureau. We'll talk about that. Johnson, the reason he vetoed the Civil Rights Bill, he felt that this was race legislation, and he thought that it would be a violation of states' rights. The Freedmen's Bureau, Johnson believed it violated states' rights and hindered free blacks from becoming totally independent. Also used the military in peacetime. So he didn't believe in military use in the South as far as like military districts. Congress will override him on both of these programs. So the impeachment of President Johnson, he will become the first president ever impeached. And what happens here, and this is totally political, this is totally a circus. Congress passes, the radical Republicans pass the Tenure of Office Act. Basically what it says is the Senate must approve the removal of any official in Johnson's administration. Well, Johnson puts this to the test, and he removes Secretary of War Edmund Stanton from the cabinet, so Congress impeaches him. He is not removed from office by one single vote, so he almost loses his job. The trial, by the way, was a complete circus. It was totally political, all that good stuff. So, and you got to remember, politically, Johnson, he believes basically he has the power to hire and fire who he wants in his administration, which presidents to this day have that power for the heads of these departments. So, in 1867, the Reconstruction Act was passed. This act didn't recognize states readmitted under the Lincoln and Johnson plan except for Tennessee. And the only reason Tennessee gets accepted is because they had ratified the 14th Amendment. The other states were divided into 5 military districts, each district basically headed by one Union general. The conditions for readmittance were 14th Amendment had to be ratified in each state. And make sure you know what the 14th Amendment says, because it's important to this day. New state constitutions had to be written to allow African Americans the right to vote. Johnson, of course, vetoes this. However, Congress overrides him. This is the leader of the Radical Republicans, Thaddeus Stevens. Keep in mind, Radical Republicans back then are more like liberal Democrats today. The parties have changed over the years. In the 20th century, they changed, and they really start changing in the 40s and 50s over social issues, but you'll see the parties change in the 1890s over economics as well. So you'll talk about that stuff a little more in American too. So make sure you know what the 14th Amendment says. It's right here. Grant citizenship to all persons born or naturalized, that's immigration, in the United States, and declared that no state could deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of the law. It also declared that no state could deny any person equal protection of the laws. In other words, equal treatment of the laws. 14th Amendment is a very important amendment. So, tenant farming. We need to know what this is. Basically, this enabled farm laborers to rent ground from landowners for a percentage of the crop. It's called crop rent or cash payments. Basically, it's called cash rent. Cash rents, cash payment, crop rents, crop payments. So it determines terms of this contracts vary depending on whether the laborer owned any of his equipment or not. Like seeds, if he had to purchase seeds, if he had to purchase supplies. So crop rent contracts generally required 1/4 to 1/3 of the crop to be paid to the landlord. And the lowest rung of tenant farming would be sharecropping. And this is basically where you lack the equipment, you lack the supplies, so you're going to have that provided to you by the landlord. Thus, they received, of course, a smaller percentage of the crops. Typically, it was 50%, 50-50. You keep 50% of crops, you have to pay 50% of the crops. The thing is this is going to keep you as a sharecropper pretty much for the rest of your life. It's like peasant farming almost. Really, it is. Many people, of course, were ex-slaves. They were sharecroppers, and as you see, they didn't have the money, so they traded one form of slavery, of course, for another, because they're basically going to be bound and tied to this land. And you say 50% of the crops, but guys, that's not going to get you through but barely a year. So you're basically subsistence farming, and you're not moving up the social ladder.